Kamala Harris is back on U.S. soil after 2 days of talks with government leaders in Guatemala and Mexico. So what did the vice president achieve during her trip? Well, nothing, unless you count utterly embarrassing stuff. Friends, it's time for Hold the Line. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. Kamala flopped in Guatemala and Mexico. I think that would be a fair headline based on the vice president's trip. Before I get into the absurdity, once again, of the border czar who refuses to go to the border, she'll fly over it, but she won't stop and actually check it out. She'll see it from the plane from 30,000 feet maybe, but she's not actually going to go to the U.S.-Mexico border in person because that would require a desire maybe to fix it. So instead, she says that her portfolio, if you will, is to work with foreign nation partners like Guatemala and Mexico to get them to stop the crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. And I would just say, first of all, let's put that crisis in context. Axios reporting today, the number of migrants illegally crossing the U.S.-Mexico border this fiscal year is already the most since 2006. With 4 months left to go, according to preliminary Customs and Border Protection data obtained by Axios. The numbers quantify a lingering problem. Nearly 900,000 migrants were stopped by the Border Patrol from October 1st to May 31st. There were also more than 170,000 apprehensions last month, in line with 20-year records set in March and April. So the border is the most open, the least secure, the most lawless that it has been in at least 20 years. By the end of this, they may just have to admit the most lawless and open and full of constant illegal crossing that it has ever been. That's what we're heading toward right now. You'd think that there'd be some urgency from this White House. You'd think the Biden administration might come along and say, we got to actually deal with this. But here's how Kamala Harris views those kinds of questions.
I have a foreign policy and a domestic policy question, but just to clear something up that's been in the news for the last 24 hours or so, can you commit right now that you will indeed visit the U.S.-Mexico border, and will you do it soon?
Jeremy, let me tell you something. Yes, I will, and I have before.
I mean, no one cares you went before. The point is the border now. The point is talking to the people who are working this issue for the federal government now. The crisis right now, if there's a tornado that hits in some state, if a tornado hits Kansas, you don't say, well, I was in Kansas 10 years ago, so I'm the FEMA director and I'm not going to show up in Kansas now. Unbelievable. Even the White House is starting to trickle out. They're like, oh my gosh, she's got to get it together. Here's CNN's, Democrat propagandist, John Harwood, who's saying, yeah, the White House doesn't like what they're seeing right now.
Poppy, it's no surprise that the White House was not thrilled by that answer, a little bit confused as to why she handled it that way. The obvious discomfort with Lester's question, the nervous laughter there, it's hard to understand because this is a question that the administration's been dealing with for months.
Yeah. And you can tell there's an assumption from Kamala Harris herself, but also from this White House. Stop asking me real questions. What are you guys doing? You know the game. You know how this is supposed to go. You're not supposed to ask me why I haven't gone to the border. I'm Team Blue. I'm a Democrat, right? That's the way that they think about this. This is the Biden White House we're talking about. You're not journalists. You're stenographers. You're propagandists. You do what we tell you to do. Well, there are some limits to the amount of debasement that these journalists are willing to go through. I mean, if you're going to sit there and put on a suit and put a microphone on your lapel and pretend that you're there to ask the real questions, you probably have to ask the border czar why she just can't find her way to the border. I think you do have to start with that. I think that's a pretty basic one. And when even some of your most stalwart, sycophantic defenders out there note that this is probably a bad look, maybe it's time to take note of that. Maybe this administration, instead of just being defensive about this, comes to the very obvious recognition, should come to the recognition, that it is absurd that Kamala Harris will not go to the border. Here is Mika Brzezinski of MSNBC, which might as well get its paycheck from the DNC.
Mika, the point of Lester's question there, and of course he was there covering her trip and looking at the root causes of that was, yes, we have to look at root causes, but there is a crisis at the border right now, today, and you have to address that today while you look at the root causes down the road.
I think also part of leading is optics and showing that what you care about and what your goals are, and going to the border would have made a big difference. This has been a discussion for weeks. I'm not sure why it hasn't happened. It's a lot easier said than done, but perhaps should have been a priority.
It's actually not hard at all for the vice president to get to the border. She's got taxpayer-funded security, plane, the whole thing. Really easy, actually. You just go. It's U.S. soil, folks. She doesn't have to leave the country. The border's still America. And show up. Hey, what's going on here? Talk to some Border Patrol people. See herself. I mean, I think that at some level, not only are they afraid that Kamala Harris would be photographed at the border on an issue that later on is just going to get worse. We all know that. So later on, she would be tied to this failure of the Biden administration. We all know she's expecting it will be the Harris administration. They will just hand this to her. But with that said, there's also the possibility that if she went down there, she would see crossings happen in real time, which are illegal, by the way. In case you're wondering, some of the people that are writing legislation, they're supposed to understand the law. AOC doesn't understand anything other than Marxist left-wing talking points, right? That's the only thing that she's good at, that and live streaming on Instagram. She responded to Vice President Harris telling people don't come from Central America to the U.S.-Mexico border. She tweeted out, "This is disappointing to see. First, asylum seeking at any U.S. border is a 100% legal method of arrival. Second, the U.S. spent decades contributing to regime change and destabilization in Latin America. We can't help set someone's house on fire, then blame them for fleeing." First off, what she says about seeking asylum, that's leaving out the whole illegal entry part. It is actually a crime. You cannot just show up at the border and say, I want asylum. That is an illegal act. Your asylum claim can then be adjudicated as defensive asylum after the illegal act of crossing, but it's almost like saying if somebody trespasses on your property but then says, I'm having a heart attack, you're going to take them to the hospital, but they were still trespassing, right? That's still a problem. That's still not okay. So this is where we are at this point in time, folks. You have the Democrats unwilling to accept the reality here of what's going on. And that's because they benefit from it politically, and they know the American people aren't with them on this. We'll continue to follow this story because I hope in a fair world, which this is not, this will cost the Democrats control of Congress in the midterms. This alone. All right, despite the fact that CDC has revised its guidelines, mask wearing remains common even among vaccinated Americans. But was masking up ever necessary? Or was the whole thing a useless charade? We asked that question with New York Post columnist Carol Markowicz when we come back. I've been telling you for a while now about online thieves who can easily steal your home's title. But you don't have to take my word for it. Take it from this thief who stole over 150 homes and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. This is why you need Home Title Lock.
Nobody thinks that I can take their house and borrow against the house. Oh, no, I have title insurance for that. No, it's in my name, or he would have to get some special document. They would call me. Nobody's calling you. After I've stolen the title, borrowed against it, or sold the property, or done whatever I've done with it, it's 60 to 90 days to even figure out that they're the victim of this crime. By that point, you start getting foreclosure notices, and you realize you've got 4 mortgages on your house. Not only that, you don't even own your home anymore. It's not even in your name.
Heard enough? Don't let this crime happen to you. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim and enter code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. That's code RADIO at home. Follow the science, wear a mask, quarantine, test and trace. All these phrases we heard from the oh-so-trusted experts of the past year and a half. But now that we're almost on the other side of this pandemic entirely, we're close to it, it's obvious that there was a lack of real debate and some questions were not able to even be asked, never mind answered appropriately. I think it's fair that Americans demand some real answers. Let's start with this. Did we ever really need these face masks? Was it scientifically proven to help stop the spread of COVID? Or did control freaks like Dr. Anthony Fauci terrify people so much that they still, to this day, feel safer wearing a mask, even though the CDC says you don't have to be wearing a mask outside, vaccinated or unvaccinated? New York Post columnist Carol Markowicz lays it all out in her latest piece. Was mask wearing pointless after all? Fauci must be forced to answer. She joins us now to discuss. Carol, a warrior for the truth on this one. Great to have you. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Bo.
So what is your case? I mean, if I could put Fauci on the witness stand right now and force the little lab coat tyrant to answer about masks specifically, what would you be posing to him? What would you want to know?
Well, the most important thing is I want to know what changed. I think I get it. Science advances, science changes, and that's the argument he's making, is that he used to believe that masks were irrelevant to stopping COVID-19, but somewhere along the way, the science changed, and now he believes that they were very useful. In fact, useful enough to become mandatory in so many places. So I want to know what happened, because he specifically says the virus is too small to be contained by masks that we find in a drugstore. At that point, it would have been medical masks in a drugstore. That's not even what we wore for 15 months. We wore T-shirts over our faces. We wore cloth masks. So I want to know what changed with the virus. Did it grow? Was the mask suddenly able to contain it because the virus got larger? I want the details, and I want our media to stop being such sycophants and just being his fan club and ask him real questions.
You know, from that email dump that recently came out from the Freedom of Information Act request, remember this one? Sylvia, masks are, this is from Dr. Anthony Fauci, February 5th of 2020. Masks are really for infected people to prevent them from spreading infection to people who are not infected, rather than protecting uninfected people from acquiring infection. Typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping out the virus, which is small enough to pass through the material. It might, however, provide some slight benefit to keep out gross droplets if someone coughs or sneezes on you. I do not recommend that you wear a mask. They keep saying that the science changed, and then we never actually hear, do we, Carol? Where? How? I mean, the studies they point to about laboratories with basically spray bottles and a mask treating a virus like it's the same thing as mist out of a spray bottle, I don't think anybody would consider that to be a gold standard level experiment.
That's right. What's really interesting is that the World Health Organization maintained this position through last summer. They had very clearly stated on their website that the only people who should be wearing masks are those infected with COVID-19 or those caring for those people. So it was interesting because I also would love to know what happened with them. What happened? Who made them change their minds? What made them change their minds? What was the science that had them into last summer, 2020, saying no masks are necessary for the regular public?
Fauci has been making the rounds now. He's getting a little prickly these days. He can definitely, you can see that he's feeling the heat. And here he is saying that the attacks on him, and I think this is the most Fauci thing ever, the attacks on him are actually just attacks on science.
Right.
A lot of what you're seeing as attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science. Because all of the things that I have spoken about consistently from the very beginning have been fundamentally based on science. Sometimes those things were inconvenient truths for people, and there was pushback against me.
This smarmy little fellow is not science. I know that he may believe that he is the personification of science and the scientific method and all knowledge. But Carol, I think that was a window into what this guy is really thinking about.
Well, so again, it would have been great for Chuck Todd to be ready with the follow-up to that, which was, okay, but you believe that schools should be open in the fall, and then you believe that schools shouldn't be open once you were, had to sit down with the teachers unions, and then you kind of believe schools should reopen, and then you kind of believe they shouldn't again. So where is the science in that? I mean, why his politicization isn't a topic of conversation when it absolutely should be, and questions should be asked about that politicization is an issue to me. It really is.
And we also have the remnants of what I call Fauciism continuing on. I'm here you're in New York too, right? So we're both here in New York City. which I assume some of this stuff is still being replicated also in Los Angeles and other major cities, which, as we know, this has all become it is very political. It's been political for a long time, but now you can see it in a way that no serious person argues otherwise. I mean, if you're a Democrat, basically, you still love Fauci, and you wear masks a lot of the time, even when there's no rational basis for mask wearing. Even if you were a mask devotee for much of the pandemic, if you're vaccinated, you're outside, why are you still doing this? I'm concerned, Carol, that if this stuff is allowed to linger in the background without real scrutiny and without the repudiation that I believe it deserves, this is going to come back. I think people are not, how can they be done when they haven't even stopped already?
Right. Well, but I have to say, I'm sure you've noticed it as well. 6 months ago, when I would say anything against Fauci, I would get a torrent of abuse on Twitter, for example. I would get so much pushback. I would, you're not a doctor, you don't know what you're talking about. But now I don't get that pushback. I think a lot of people have soured on Fauci, and I think a lot of people do realize that this was all nonsense and none of this made any sense. And, wearing the mask for the 2 steps into a restaurant and then taking it off when you sit down at the table, we all knew this was not a thing. This is not, science. And I think a lot of people have accepted it. But we happen to live in the bluest areas, of the country. And here there's still some lingering Fauci obsession. And it's really just, it's too bad. I mean, I'm in Park Slope. I don't know when they're taking off their masks in Park Slope. Like,
tell everybody, before we let you go, Carol, you recently took one of your children to a birthday party at a skating rink. What did you get put through?
Prospect Park has a roller skating rink, and you need a mask to pick up your skates, but you don't need a mask to put them on. But then you do need a mask to skate outdoors. It was 93 degrees last Saturday. Everybody was wearing the most disgusting masks you've ever seen. My son and I got twice told by the security guard to put up our masks. The security guard himself is wearing it under his nose because it's 93 degrees. And then we go to the food and cake area, and everybody's packed together, and we're all just like blowing our aerosols all over each other. It makes no sense. It has never made any sense. We need to stop this now.
I could not agree with you more, and I appreciate that you are staying on this because, first of all, it hasn't gone away, as you and I are both talking about right now, and it will come back full force unless people have to face the reality, which is that Fauci was full of crap and he was wrong on pretty much every major decision that was left to him and his little bureaucrat friends at the CDC and the NIH. Carol, stay on it. Thanks for what you've done here. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
It's been 2 months since Dante Wright was shot and killed by a police officer in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. But a pair of civil suits against the man's estate are now casting the troubled 20-year-old in a new light. After the break, the First TV's Rob Smith joins us to discuss this new twist in the case. Are you ready for the next national disaster? If we've learned one thing recently, it's that the unthinkable can happen at any minute. The best way to ensure you survive is to prepare now with an emergency food stockpile from My Patriot Supply. They're America's preparedness leader, giving millions peace of mind for an uncertain future. But don't wait until it's too late. Act now before there's a stock market crash, more civil unrest, a natural disaster, or worse. My Patriot Supply has served millions of families for over a decade, earning 39,000 4- and 5-star reviews. Their food is specially packaged to stay fresh and delicious for 25 years. And unlike other emergency foods, each meal provides 2,000 much-needed calories when you need them most. If you act now, you'll save 25% on their 4-week emergency food kit. Just go to preparewiththefirst.com right now. Save 25% on this valuable 4-week kit. That's preparewiththefirst.com. Again, go to that website now, preparewiththefirst.com. It's been 2 months since 20-year-old Dante Wright was shot and killed by a police officer in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. The former officer involved in the shooting, 26-year veteran Kim Potter, is currently out on bond and awaiting a trial for manslaughter, which, based on the video and all the evidence, she should. Looks like she'll probably end up taking a plea. But in a bizarre turn of events, a pair of civil lawsuits has been filed against Wright's estate. The idea being that it's likely that the Wright estate will end up getting millions and millions of dollars as a judgment against the police department. And this filed lawsuit alleges that Dante Wright shot a teen and a former classmate on separate occasions. Fox News reports in May 2019, 16-year-old Caleb Livingston was at a full-stop gas station in Minneapolis when Wright allegedly pulled out a gun and shot him in the head. Livingston is now in a vegetative state. The report continues. 3 weeks before his death, Wright and an accomplice allegedly shot former classmate Joshua Hodges in the leg and stole his car, according to the second civil lawsuit. The accomplice's bullet is said to have broken his fibula, struck an artery, and left him with permanent damage. The accusations paint a very different portrait of Wright than one that's been presented by many politicians and the corporate media. While Reverend Al Sharpton described Wright as a, quote, prince, the truth was far more complicated. Joining me now as host of the Rob Smith is Problematic podcast, a contributor right here at the First TV, Rob Smith. Rob, great to have you.
Hey, great to be here, Buck.
So look, Rob, we've all seen the video of what Kim Potter did. It seems very clear that she was guilty of involuntary manslaughter, essentially, an accident, trying to use non-lethal force, use lethal force, and she's being held to account for that. But this individual, Dante Wright, is also now, as is often the case with the BLM movement, held up as an icon, a martyr, and we hear so much about what an upstanding and excellent fellow he was. And I just think that we can deal with an incident that is police misuse of force, is police excessive force, without pretending that somebody involved in that is a civil rights hero. And the BLM movement seems to keep doing this.
Yeah, this is what they do every time. Now, listen, there is not a single person that was involved in one of these BLM-type shootings, whether it's Dante Wright, whether it's Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta, whether it was Jacob Blake. Not a single one of these people did not have some sort of history with police interactions in the past, right? This is not to say that they deserve to die, because they did not. Obviously, the officer in this case made a huge mistake that she's probably going to do some time for. But these people did not have, it was not new for them to be having interactions with police officers, right? So I'm not very surprised by that. And what's happened is that the mainstream media kind of overcorrected when it comes to how they present these cases and how they cover these cases. So in the past, they were trying so hard to not present Black men as criminals, as anything like that. Then they would actually omit information like this person's previous criminal history, like George Floyd's previous criminal history, like Jacob Blake's previous criminal history, like Rayshard Brooks's previous criminal history. They would omit things that are very important to creating the entire narrative around it. And so now that the BLM grift train got to all of these people, don't forget George Floyd was literally buried in a golden casket with Tiffany Haddish crying over at his funeral. I don't know what one thing has to do with another, but now that these BLM cases come, there's a grift that's involved with it, right? So they get millions of dollars in civil lawsuits. They get millions of dollars in GoFundMe, and they get all that stuff. So it is absolutely right for the people who were victimized by Dante Wright before this to file a civil suit, because that man's family is going to get millions of dollars from all this stuff. And yes, they are entitled to something, especially if that man victimized these people before he was killed.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to watch that there are journalists, people in the media that really, they don't want to get involved with the coverage of this lawsuit or this story, because they much prefer a situation where if the media doesn't talk about it, well then, as you point out, the criminal history of some of these individuals that are in a lethal force situation with law enforcement that then BLM elevates gets buried. People don't know about it, they don't care about it, doesn't matter. Because this has been taken to court, and because of the seriousness of, we're not saying that Dante Wright, sold some weed at some point, or, was driving while intoxicated and saying, oh, he's a criminal. This is a guy who allegedly shot somebody in the head and turned him into a vegetative state for the rest of his life. This is somebody that shot somebody he knew in the leg, did permanent damage. This was an individual who, if these allegations are true, was a danger to the public. And so while that doesn't change the guilt or culpability of Officer Potter in that situation, it seems like it should factor in to whether, as you point out, we elevate people that the BLM movement chooses here into the status of being a martyr and being an icon.
It is. And, it is only the conservative media that actually talks about this stuff, so people can pretend like it doesn't exist. They can pretend like you, me, or other places. I know Brandon Tatum over at Tatum Report is very good when these cases come out. They're saying, hey, guys, this is what this is, and this is this person's criminal background. I'm just putting this out there. But they're very good at ignoring those things if they don't come from MSNBC or the Washington Post or CNN, which obviously they never will, because we know that those people are so afraid of the BLM hordes, and they are so afraid of the woke Twitter mob that they will not do their job, which is actually reporting, right? And so this is a failure not only of the mainstream media in these cases, CNN, WAPO, MSNBC, but this is also a failure of the local journalists in these cases, because local reporters should have found this stuff out. Local reporters should have been doing the reporting on the ground about the history of some of these people and the context to this. And this is not to demonize everybody that is encountering some police violence or anything like that. But like I said in the very beginning, every single one of these BLM cases that is elevated to a national platform where people get, Ben Crump swoops in and Al Sharpton and all the other race hustling grifters swoop in. There is not a single one of these cases where the person does not have some sort of criminal background and some sort of background where they are more familiar with police than the average person.
Rob, good to see you. Thanks for sharing your perspective.
Absolutely. Good to see you, bud.
Who's the latest to join the critical race theory squad? Well, none other than Barack Obama himself. It's not a surprise. Gad Saad joins me next to discuss the ongoing fight we're in against the woke left. Stay tuned.
You would think, with all the public policy debates that are taking place right now, that the Republican Party would be engaged in a significant debate about how are we going to deal with the economy, and what are we going to do about climate change, and what are we going to do about, lo and behold, the single most important issue to them apparently right now is critical race theory. Who knew that was the threat to our republic?
The progressive left has now deployed Obama to defend and, yes, downplay critical race theory. The former president accused conservatives of stoking fear and resentment among white Americans. So where's the debate heading now? Why is this going on the way that it is? And can the country afford another divide in the form of CRT? Let's bring in someone who's always fighting the woke agenda. Gad Saad, author of The Parasitic Mind, How Infectious Ideas Are Killing Common Sense. Gad, good to see you.
You too, Buck. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
I'm wondering if you can give us your take on, here the president now seems to be doing what the left often deploys as a tactic, which is make something a big issue, whether it's pronoun usage or some form of the trans agenda in schools, whatever it may be. And then when people say, hold on a second, we actually have an issue with how this is going, they say, why are you making such a big deal of it?
Well, it amazes me that he would take the position that he's taking, because one of two things can explain why he's taking the position. He truly doesn't understand the downstream effects of having such a ideology spread like a cancer across all schools and universities, or he actually understands the implication and he's being diabolically duplicitous. But in either cases, it is an insane position to take, because there's nothing more dangerous than organizing a society along identity politics line. I come from Lebanon, the perfect society if you care about identity politics. Everything in Lebanon was organized along your religious tribalism. It's not a good place to be, and it's certainly a lot more concerning than CO2 emissions.
And we have we have so many cases. We'll go through some of them with you today. There are more than we can cover in just one short TV segment. But you've got a New Jersey prep school teacher. Actually, I know this school, the Dwight Englewood School. It's a private school in northern New Jersey. And a woman resigned. Here's what she wrote in her letter. I reject the hostile culture of conformity and fear that has taken hold of our school. The school's ideology requires students to see themselves not as individuals, but as representatives of a group, forcing them to adopt the status of privilege or victimhood. As a result, students arrive in my classroom accepting this theory as fact. People born with less melanin in their skin are oppressors, and people born with more melanin in their skin are oppressed. Men are oppressors, women are oppressed. This is the dominant and divisive ideology that is guiding our adolescent students. It seems to me like she's just talking about what is being indoctrinated or what students are being indoctrinated with right now in schools. Is it this straightforward? I mean, why can't we talk about this? Why isn't this a problem?
It is a problem, and I guess the optimistic perspective on all this is that just like this teacher who decided to actually activate her inner honey badger and come out against this nonsense, tomorrow on my own show, if I forgive the shameless plug, I'll have Andrew Gutman on. He is famously the parent who wrote this unbelievably eloquent letter. I don't know if you know the case that I'm talking about.
New York City school, right? It was for the Grace Church School. Or Dalton. One of them.
No, not Dalton. Braillard, or I can't remember. Some B
Brearley.
word. I can't
Brearley.
That's exactly. And what basically this is showing is that people are starting to push back, whether it be parents who are fed up of this nonsense or teachers who don't wish to promulgate this nonsense. In the same way that CRT has spread across all the ecosystems, you're now starting to see resistance to this stuff also spread. And as you probably know, Christopher Ruffo, to give him a shout out, has been spearheading a lot of the efforts. So I think we can be optimistic that we can turn the tide around, but people have to get involved.
I don't know if you saw this. There was an exchange. You mentioned Christopher Ruffo, between Chris Ruffo and Mark Lamont Hill, somebody that I know well and have worked with. And Mark asked him, what do you like about whiteness? A lot of people on the right got very angry at what they felt like was an unfair bear trap, if you will, meant to essentially provoke a response that would all of a sudden then be used against him. How do you think one put in that situation what should answer the question? I mean, why is that question automatically going to be, resulting in the kinds of really heated feelings that it did?
Well, I went after that racist imbecile. I'm talking about Lamont Hill. And I would dare him to ask me those types of questions, because I would turn him from a three-dimensional creature to a two-dimensional creature. Because I would say to him, I don't have to answer a question of what it is that I like about my skin hue. I'll list you the 74,000 reasons why you should like Gad Saad. And here are some other reasons why you should not like Gad Saad. In other words, my personhood is defined by the totality of my merits and flaws, not by my skin hue. And you asking such a question suggests that you are no different than any previous racist that we used to castigate. But now, because you are a noble person of color, you're allowed leeway to ask such a racist question. I mean, I thought that Christopher was a lot more, dispassionate in his response than I would have been, because I truly found it galling that he would ask such a question. It was unbelievable.
I, earlier in the week, talked about the psychiatrist from here in New York City who went up to Yale Medical School. Here's just a little bit of that lecture. We wanted to have your take on this, Gad.
Oh, yes.
I had fantasies of unloading a revolver into the head of any white person that got in my way, burying their body, and wiping my bloody hands as I walked away relatively guiltless. With a bouncing like that, like I did the world a favor. White people are out of their minds, and they had been for a long time.
This happened at Yale.
It's unbelievable.
It's amazing.
Right. There's this thing called the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. This lady is provided with an opportunity to heal people with their emotional and cognitive problems. If I am a white person, would I be comfortable going to see her now? Then she's come back now and said, no, it was metaphorical, it was allegorical, you shouldn't take it literally. That's always what people say once you shine the light on their hatred. But she also said that she has decolonized her friendship circle, right? She no longer deals with white people. How could this person be a practicing psychiatrist? Does this mean that she only treats people who are of a certain skin hue? So imagine that this person gets a free pass and she's supposed to be a healer in the most intimate of situations, right? She is a surgeon of the soul, right? She's a psychiatrist. I'm going on the proverbial couch to share my most intimate weaknesses with you, and yet she gets a free pass. But if some idiot actor says something 25 years ago in a tweet, he is canceled, but she can go on with her medical license. It's unbelievable.
You mentioned people getting canceled. Chris Harrison, I can say I've only been made to watch The Bachelor a couple of times by
I've never watched it.
Lady friends. I've been forced. It was like making a hostage video, except I was watching instead of making it. But Chris Harrison got canceled, not for doing anything wrong, but for asking for a bit more forgiveness for a woman who attended a wedding with an antebellum South theme at the wedding. That woman, I believe, is actually engaged to be married to a black man, and yet she still was canceled, and he was canceled for even saying maybe we could be a little more understanding of her. He now wants $25 million from ABC. I hope he gets it. And he's not the Democrat president's son, so he's not allowed to get away with racism, it seems. Or even, I'm sorry, get away with asking for a degree of mercy for someone who attended an antebellum themed party.
So let me explain here what this hypocrisy demonstrates. In Sharia law, which is Islamic law, it's completely antithetical to the Western concept of blind justice, because a crime, the punishment of a crime is determined by the identity of the victim and the perpetrator in Sharia law, right? So if you're a Muslim man and you kill a Jewish woman, it's very different than if you were a Jewish man who kills a Muslim woman. And I mean, it's literally codified in Sharia law. Well, the progressive calculus is exactly the same, right? So someone like the psychiatrist, because her melanin is darker, she's allowed to get away with things, whereas the guy from The Bachelor, even if he says something that's a lot more tepid and gentle compared to what she said, he is not forgiven. So it's exactly Sharia law that's come to the West, cloaked in the robe of progressivism. It's unbelievable.
Gad Saad, I'm joining him on his show, which is a great podcast. Gad, where do folks find it?
The Sad Truth is currently on YouTube channel. It's also on all over the podcast platforms. And soon there will be announcement about a new licensing deal, but I can't talk about it yet.
Exciting stuff. Gad, good to see you.
Thank you, sir. Cheers. Take care.
When we come back, a viral video shows you why you should not be wearing a mask outdoors, especially when you're sunbathing. Stay tuned for quick hits. We're living in very uncertain times, and being prepared for the unknown is more important than ever. I'm sure you've noticed the world we live in today is anything but predictable. The government is passing massive spending bills, the Federal Reserve is printing trillions of dollars in fiat currency, and many experts are predicting inflation could run rampant in the coming months. That could spell disaster for the dollars in your bank account. We can all benefit from something a little more reliable right about now. Well, what could be more reliable than real gold and silver? I'm talking about real gold and silver you can actually hold right in your hands. Call the Oxford Gold Group right now and learn how easy it is to get real gold and silver sent securely directly to your home, or how you can have real gold and silver placed in your IRA or 401k. Just call the Oxford Gold Group at 833-600-GOLD and ask for your free guide on owning gold and silver. Again, call the Oxford Gold Group right now at 833-600-GOLD. The Oxford Gold Group is the only gold company I trust. Call them right now, 833-600-GOLD, 833-600-GOLD. Cautionary tale about why you shouldn't wear your mask outdoors. I mean, come on, we all know that, right? And also another Trump-era media lie bites the dust. Those stories on Quick Hits. Let's get to it, shall we? Let's actually start with this crazy former FBI assistant director, Figliuzzi, who goes on MSNBC and says the most insane things. And people think that he's an expert because he was a senior FBI official. The FBI's reputation is in tatters, and unfortunately, we all understand why. The CIA's reputation, where I used to work, in tatters. We all understand why. And it's because, in part, of people who use that affiliation to create some perception that what they say is worthwhile or even sane, and then they go on TV and say things like this.
Chris Wray testified publicly on the Hill that what happened on January 6th is domestic terrorism. What have we learned from our experience with international terrorism? In order to address that problem, arresting low-level operatives is merely a speed bump, not a roadblock. In order to really tackle terrorism, and this time domestically, you've got to attack and dismantle the command and control element of a terrorist group. And unfortunately, and I know this is painful to hear, that may mean people sitting in Congress right now.
Yeah. Go arrest members of Congress who are Republicans because they're like the bin Ladens of the insurrection. You moron. Unbelievable. This guy's on MSNBC getting paid to say this stupid stuff. I think he's a contributor. It doesn't matter. He's on MSNBC one way or another. That's the kind of stuff they like over there. Channel's really an embarrassment. I mean, so is CNN. At least MSNBC, everyone knows, is left-wing lunacy. CNN still kind of pretends that it's journalism, which is funny, isn't it? Because it's not. It's not. And yet here we are. Speaking of CNN and journalism and the fact that these things don't really go together anymore and that there is no honesty in the profession of journalism from the corporate media, remember when we were told that police cleared Lafayette Park of protesters so that Trump could have a photo op back when the left, the Democrats, were having their daily riots all across the country, including trying to burn down a historic church right next to the White House, burning down a police station in Minneapolis, trying to burn down a federal courthouse in Portland, billions of dollars of damage, dozens of people severely wounded and or killed. I mean, you know, the left just doing politics the way that it does. Remember when that was going on? They said that Trump cleared the park and used tear gas for a photo op. That was the line. You know what's funny about that? Not funny, but just important, I guess. It was a lie. It was a lie. Police did not clear D.C.'s Lafayette Park of protesters so Trump could hold a photo op. Here's what happened. Quote, when federal police officers violently cleared protesters from the city's Lafayette Park in June 2020, they did it so a contractor could install fencing, not to let President Trump hold a photo opportunity at a nearby church. This is according to an investigation by the Interior Department's Inspector General. That finding, published Wednesday, is likely to surprise many critics of Trump, who have long asserted the president or his attorney general ordered the operation to pave the way for an act of political theater. The press got it wrong. And they got it wrong in a way that was damaging to Trump. What a shock. How often does this have to happen before anybody who is just not a complete idiot will admit, yeah, the press was being dishonest in their efforts to destroy Donald Trump. Yes, they would do anything, they'd say anything, whatever they could get away with, whatever they thought would work. I mean, I think we're already there. The Cleveland Clinic had a big study out. I've been saying for a while now, including on this show, when do we get to talk about naturally acquired immunity? It's a thing that is really important. I have it. I had COVID. I have natural immunity now. So why should I have to get vaccinated again? Do they have any science to speak of on this? Is there some data they can point to? No, not really. And now the Cleveland Clinic comes out with this, a study on the necessity of COVID vaccine in previously infected patients. Here's the conclusion from this. The Cleveland Clinic, a very serious medical institution, widely regarded, well regarded. The conclusion is individuals who have had SARS-CoV-2 infection are unlikely to benefit from COVID-19 vaccination, and vaccines can be safely prioritized to those who have not been infected before. So they're saying, look, I mean, you can still get vaccinated if you want, but will it actually do anything for you if you've already had COVID? Maybe not. Gee, I think that's kind of important, don't you? As they're telling everybody, the 100+ million people, maybe up to 140 or 150 million people who have had COVID, they're all being told, rush out and get the shot. Really? Natural immunity? What we thought we knew about the science keeps changing all the time. Stuff that we thought we've known for the last 100 years or so, all of a sudden gets thrown upside down because Fauci said something or because, the Democrats want to make an issue of it. And then this is like a public service announcement for all of you. This is what can happen when you wear a mask outside.
So I'm out sunbathing in the garden yesterday and I forgot to take my face mask off. I'm really not happy, guys. How am I meant to go to work like this?
Is that real, guys? I don't know if that was a control room. I'm not sure I'm buying that one, but all right, it's a helpful reminder either way. That's it for tonight's Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly's next. Shields high.